Aaron, reviewing all these teams and how they did this last season, it's got me really excited for a few squads this upcoming fall.
Hey, well, let's talk about them. Welcome back to First and Short, your first place to get short bits of college football news and analysis. It's hosted by myself, Aaron, and I'm with my co-host here, Mashfik. Before we get started, we definitely got to plug ourselves, so please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course YouTube. Moving forward, looking at the agenda, we got a couple of things to talk about. Like you mentioned, we got some teams that we're super excited to talk about this year, and we have report cards for Notre Dame, Clemson, and Oregon. So, Mash, why don't you go ahead and get us started? Looking forward, looking ahead to the 2026 year, who's that one team that you're really excited to watch next year?
Yeah, I mean, we've already we've already given a report card to Texas, and just looking through their transfer portal, just doing a little bit more, research here and there. I'm really excited to see this Arch Manning and Cam Coleman connection, man. So Texas, they went 10-3 in 2025. We've talked about that, but they really those last 4 or 5 games, they were really on a tear. They looked really good, and I think with Cam Coleman coming in, right? It's going to be a perfect marriage of a quarterback who loves to throw the deep ball. There's stats to back up how much Arch Manning throws the ball 20 plus yards or more, and a receiver who specializes in catching and winning 50-50 balls. And there's stats to back that up as well. Just to go a little bit into it, Arch Manning in his last 5 games for 2025, he accounted for 15 touchdowns and only one turnover. With Cam Coleman coming out of the portal, number one wide receiver, maybe number two player overall, he averaged a ridiculous, I think it was a little like 14.1 yards per target last year. So he's just a walking first down. The problem that Auburn had, they fed him a little too much, so it became a little stagnant. You know where the ball is going, right? Here at Texas, he's got Ryan Wingo on the other side, so now Arch Manning has, oh, look at that, 2 options on 2 sides. And what's going to really help? What's going to really help Arch Manning and the Texas offense is that they have a new look running back room to help get these wide receivers open, right? They added Hollywood Smothers, the North Carolina State transfer. He is the projected starter. He Smothers averaged nearly a little over 4 yards per contact. Sorry, 4 yards after contact last season. So he's going to be, a very patient bruiser type runner, who fits, Sark's outside zone scheme pretty good. The other running back that they added, Raleek Brown, he's from Arizona State. You can think of him as more of a Swiss Army knife. He is a fast running back. He can line up in the slot or in the backfield. He will give Arch Manning a good safety valve on those check down type of plays. So all in all together, it's a brand new look. We know that Texas got rid of a lot of people that they had on offense. They're going all in on this new look. So that's offense sells tickets, offense scores points. I'm excited to watch this specific squad next year.
Yeah. You mentioned, they brought in a lot of stars. It seems like they are the pieces to help awake this offense on all levels. Is there anything that you're worried about for this team?
I'm worried about I'm worried that these running backs aren't gonna pan out. Like that is the for Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman to work. We have enough of a proof of concept of what Cam Coleman can do at the SEC level. Um, what I'm worried about is Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers coming in and their skill levels don't translate. If their running back room is stifled continuously, like it was this past year, then Arch Manning is going to have to do a lot more with his legs. He's going to have to do a lot more trying to feed these two wide receivers. And once that becomes a little stale and like teams know that that's what's going to happen, then it's just going to be the same story all over again. So that's what I'm worried about. These running backs have to pan out the way Sarkisian is kind of hoping to do. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. Championship or bust. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? What team are you excited to see next year?
For me, it's definitely gonna have to be in the same conference.
Okay.
LSU. I'm thinking, with this what they've done in the past couple months, we're seeing a whole new team, a whole new DNA. Um, they're coming into next year with arguably one of the best coaches in college football and the best transfer portal class we're going to see this year. Um, I think everyone is expecting, a win now mentality from this team. So don't be surprised if people are frustrated with a 10-2 year from a team like this.
Yeah.
Uh, they're getting stars from all over the country, and they will be filling up, the roster and performing in the SEC next season. One player in particular that I'm excited to see about, Sam Levitt, right? He's going to be one of my early Heisman favorites already. He was already a stud at Arizona State. Now you give him, this offensive-minded guru at head coach and all the athletes he needs to support, around him. And it's going to be in a prestigious conference that gets national television viewership every weekend, right? I think this team might be one of the most watched programs on a national television front next year.
Yep.
So
Wouldn't surprise me there.
that's going to be very exciting, right? Um, Another thing, traditionally, this team has been a defensive strength team, right? The strength has always been there for them on defense. Pairing this, you know, with a offense who should be star-studded and explosive next year, we might see some matchups for them against SEC opponents to where it gets ugly for the other teams on their calendar, right?
Yeah.
It'll be definitely be very, very interesting.
hmm I'll ask you the same question you asked me. What is something that worries you? Obviously, this is a huge portal team, but what worries you about Lane Kiffin's approach to the 2026 LSU Tigers?
So I mentioned it as a strength earlier, right? Whole new team, whole new DNA. I'm worried that, you know, when you have this much change in a program, is everything gonna mesh and glue together as good as it's supposed to, as fast as they want it to, right?
Yeah,
Usually, in the old traditional era, when you were a new coach or you brought in a lot of new freshmen in recruiting, you had some time to mold and grow, right? This is a win now state for LSU, but the fan
yeah.
base, how involved the state is and politicking who's there, like,
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Yep.
so I worry that the pressure is going to be on so much, and this team may, pressure either makes diamonds or burst pipes. So there's potential chance that a pipe could burst because of the pressure, and all eyes are on LSU to just be perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when you have a lot of change, just on your roster, that does a lot of that has a lot of pressure internally, like, on the football team, but
Mhm.
the governor of LSU was getting involved in how Brian Kelly was, demoted and all that sort of stuff from last year, so that's a whole lot of pressure that I don't think I've heard any school has had to deal with, so, that'll be something interesting to watch and definitely something to worry about, in case 1 or 2 losses start to pile up, in Baton Rouge. Cool. Well, yeah, those are the 2 teams that we are excited about. Maybe we'll, as the summer goes on, I could get excited. So we might hear something at spring camp where we get excited again. So we'll keep an eye on some other teams in that regard. But for right now, let's talk about 2025 Notre Dame and what they were able to do and what their report card looks like. So with that being said, Notre Dame, they had, I will say, a pretty good season, right? They were number 2 in scoring offense, number 11 in scoring defense. They had 15, they were plus 15 on the takeaway margin. They did a lot of things really well. They just lost a couple of games that they needed to win in order to make the playoffs, and they probably could have went pretty far. But when your 2 losses are to the teams um, that had any type of pulse, then you know maybe you don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But to quit before your bowl game, that's gonna get a little knocked down on the points on the grading scale for me. But we'll get to that in a bit. Let's start with their expected versus actual record. So most experts, they put them somewhere in the 10 to 11 regular season win range. Also, most people viewed the Irish as a lock for the expanded 12-team playoffs, given their veteran roster, favorable schedule. All that being said, they did go 10-2, so can't knock them too hard for that. They did lose their two games that they needed to win against quality opponents. Granted, they were playoff, opponents, Texas A&M and Miami. Um, that 0-2 start, it created a zero margin of error, that ultimately left them out of that whole conversation the rest of the year. So, for their record, I'm gonna give them a B minus.
Yeah, yeah. I agree there. I hate, that decision to stay out of the postseason because you did make the playoffs. I mean, feels crybaby, and I feel like
Yeah,
the obvious solution if you don't want that to happen, join a conference, right? Um,
yeah,
Nonetheless, let's move on to the next category, coaching. Marcus Freeman in particular. He's going to earn high marks and high praise from us just because of his crisis management, right? Like you said, he started 0-2. Most coaches would have folded after losing back-to-back games to Miami and Texas to open the season. Instead, he kept that locker room together and he saw his team improve, every single week. And his decision to stick with, young QB CJ Carr, it paid off in the end and it gave dividends. So, being able to bounce back from that and maintain, the record and have a 10-game win streak, we're gonna give him a B plus.
nice. I
Mhm.
like that. B plus is good. Offense and defense, right? Yeah, they had a young quarterback come in, CJ Carr. He did pretty good. Uh, so the offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, this unit really was a juggernaut. They obviously had Jeremiah Love, Heisman. Uh, he was in New York, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, Heisman finalist. They averaged 42 points a game, which is second in the nation, like I said earlier. And Jeremiah Love was a superstar. Obviously, helped alleviate the load for CJ Carr. He racked up almost 1,400 rushing yards, 21 total touchdowns. He was definitely the engine for this Fighting Irish offense. And then CJ Carr himself, he had 2,700 yards and 24 touchdowns in his first year as a starter. So on the offensive side, I'll give them an A. They did good there. Their defense, B plus, pretty good. They had a new defensive coordinator, Chris Ash, uh, and they only allowed 17.6 points per game. That puts them 11th nationally. So pretty elite, I think. And they were really good in November, right? So they lost those first two games, and then they won everything after that. But they were particularly lethal near the end of the year in November when it really counts. And they only allowed just 12 points per game in their last 5 games. So that defense really locked in. I'm gonna give their offense and defense A minus altogether.
Okay. Okay. I agree there. I agree there. Let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's talk about their schedule and what their best win and worst loss of the season was. So, I'll start with the worst loss. So, they had the back-to-back losses, and those were the only losses of the season. Um, I'm gonna have to go with the Texas A&M loss, right? They lost by 1 point there. While the Miami loss was tough, losing that home opener by a single point after leading 17-7, that was probably, the dagger if you look at it in hindsight that cost them a playoff spot.
Yeah,
So very, very, very tough there. Best win, however, like you said, they really turned it up in November, and I think the win against ranked 20 USC and Lincoln Riley, 34-24, really was a turning point, right? After being down 0-2 to begin the season, this is a statement win against a ranked rival, to regain some national respect. They dominated in the trenches and they proved that they're still a top tier program.
yeah,
So overall they get a B plus.
yeah. Considering Notre Dame and USC aren't going to play in that rivalry game for the near future, that win is probably even more sweet that they can rub that into their rivals for the foreseeable future. Let's
Mhm.
and speaking of future, let's talk about the portal and their preparation for the future. The Irish have really been, winning here. I'm gonna go ahead and give them an A+ in this category. They have a top two recruiting class looking into next year. Um, and they've got 3 5-star prospects, and they've been doing really well in the portal as well. They got Quincy Porter and Keon Keeley out of Alabama. So those two guys will fill immediate needs for the team, and I have nothing but high marks for them in that regard. All of that put together, I am going to give Notre Dame an A- for the season. Pretty good season. Yes, it didn't end in a playoff spot like they're almost guaranteed to, but look, they got a lot of good things that they did this year. CJ Carr did really well as a first year starter. Next year, I think they're even more of a shoe in. So like it's fine, right? Do well next year and you'll be in. So yeah. Any final thoughts on Notre Dame before we move on?
Nope, I completely agree there. They were right at the door of CFB playoffs. As long as they continue the same momentum, and then with the slight rule change, I think they'll pretty much be guaranteed a spot.
Nice.
Yep. Moving on into our next team, we're going to talk about the Clemson Tigers. Their season this year was a little bit of a historic wake up call, right? For the first time since 2010, the Tigers lost 5 regular season games, and they finished, without a top tier bowl bid. Um, Dabo Sweeney, head coach of the Tigers, even admitted that he sucks as a coach during their 3-5 start. Though they had a late season rally that saved the record from being a total disaster. So here's the report card for the 2025 Clemson Tigers. We'll start with expected record. They're going to get a D here, right? So expected record, they were an ACC favorite. We expect them to go either 11-1 or 10-2. They were ranked number 4 in the AP poll, and like I said, they were favorites to win the ACC and secure a first round bye in the college football playoffs. They actually finished 7-6, and they went 4-4 in the ACC. Pretty disappointing when you've seen historically in the past 10 years they've just been a top tier team in that conference, rolling through their conference schedule. Um, Arguably, this is probably one of the most disappointing seasons of the Dabo Sweeney era. Falling from the top 5 to unranked by week 4, represents the massive failure relative to the talent on the roster that everybody was expecting them to perform at. So yeah,
Yeah,
D there.
I can agree with that. Yeah. I would even see the lower grade, if necessary there. The slide that they had will be studied by Clemson fans for generations, I think. Coaching, let's get into coaching. We'll give them a C- here. Um, we'll call it the Sweeney slide, okay? So, Dabo was uncharacteristically blunt about his team struggles. But I mean, that's pretty good for a coach, right? Like, forget the coach speak. Let's get to the issue and let's talk about our problems. But he took personal responsibility for the lack of execution, which, I mean, Cade Klubnik has potential. They had Garrett Riley. That was supposed to be a very well-oiled machine, and clearly it was not. Something was wrong on the coaching side on that, I think. But the decision to stick with that stagnant offensive philosophy, it comes back to the head man. So Dabo will get a knock for that for sure. Um, he did fire offensive coordinator Garrett Riley near the end of the year, and he's bringing in Chad Morris to modernize the tempo. So at the end of the season, when the season's over, now he's finally saying, okay, how do we improve? So like looking forward, he gets maybe a couple points extra for solving that one issue. But all in all, I'm going to give him a C- for coaching here.
Okay. Okay. I agree there. I feel like it reflects the record, mid grade for coaching because He performed at a mid-level this year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's going to be pretty much the same for the offense and defensive categories, right? So we're going to give them overall a C plus for performance on offense and defense. But individually on offense, we're going to give them a D plus, and here's why. Um, the unit, was a shell of its former self. They ranked 72 nationally in scoring, about 27.2 points a game, and 105th rushing. So you know, Cade Klubnik, he had a prolific statistical career, finishing over for 10,000 yards. But, the 2025 offense was defined by the lack of explosive plays, right? And the 34% third down conversion rate. That's really a killer for drives and keeping momentum going. So not the best on offense this year. On defense, on the other hand, they performed a little bit better. We're going to give them a B plus on defense. It was the only reason that Clemson stayed competitive this year. They ranked 20th nationally in scoring defense, only giving up about 20.5 points per game. Um, while they were shredded through the air during, a 3-game home losing streak in October, they remained a top 25 unit overall. So offense really took a regression this year, but the defense helped keep things together at least for a little while. And that's why they're getting a C plus from me.
Nice. I like it.
Mhm.
Let's talk about their best win and worst loss here. So, best win, end of the year, kind of, regular season, 28-14 at South Carolina, which is great because South Carolina, they had an up and down year, but they were mostly up, I think, and South Carolina up and down year, mostly down. But to, finish off your season with on a high point, especially beating them on the road, a rival on the road during a 4-game oh, sorry, and they got a 4-game winning streak. It adds to a lot of momentum. So I'm gonna say that was their best win for the year. Their worst loss has to be that 46-45 loss versus Duke. That was their first loss to Duke for the first time at home since 1980, and that was really a low point for the year. They had lost 3 straight home games so far, which was previously unthinkable. And I want to add maybe an honorable mention here. The beginning of the year, we talked about that battle for Death Valley. Losing that game is pretty bad too, because you lost the rights to calling yourself Death Valley. So I
Mhm.
want to include that as an honorable mention for worst loss. But anyway, we give this category an aggregate of C plus.
Okay. Agreed, agreed. And so let's talk about, what are they doing now? We know Dabo's pretty much theory on this new era of college football. How are they going to prepare for the future, right? They're going to get an A minus here. After years of resisting, Clemson is all in, right? They were named, one of the hottest transfer portal teams for 2026, landing immediate impact players like Elliott Washington at cornerback and edge rusher London Merritt. Um, Recruiting for 2026, despite a 7-6 finish, they ranked 18th nationally. They leaned heavy into the offensive line recruiting. They signed 6 guys on the O line, and that's to fix some of the protection issues that plagued Klubnik this year. Yeah. So, I mean, overall for Clemson, right? They lost 4 home games in 2025. Let's kind of put that in perspective. That's what we've known Clemson for the past Dabo swinging era, which has been a while. From 2014 to 2024, that's an 11 season span. They lost a total of 3 games at home. So 4 games lost this year is more than they've lost at home in the past 11 seasons. So we've definitely saw a different team this year in Clemson. And that's why ultimately for their overall grade, they're going to get a C minus from us.
C minus, that seems like a very fair grade for Clemson there. Um, Good. Let's move on to Oregon then. I think Oregon's 2025 season was a case of so close yet so far. It seemed like they fixed a lot of issues that they had in the previous year. They started the year pretty dominantly. They cemented themselves as a Big Ten powerhouse in just their second year, in the conference. They won the Big Ten the year before, right? So, uh, but they hit a pretty massive roadblock in the form of an Indiana Hoosier twice, actually, right? So here is the report card for the 2025 Oregon Ducks. Starting with their expected versus actual record, I'm gonna give them an A minus here. They were somewhere in the 11 to 12 regular season win range. They entered the season ranked the top 5. I had them picked as one of my 3 national champion picks. Um, and I thought they had a good chance of repeating in the Big Ten as well as champs. There, they actually went 13-2. I think 1 loss in the regular season. Um, Statistically, this was one of the best seasons in program history. Right? They reached the semifinals, the CFP semifinals, the Peach Bowl, and then they won the Orange Bowl. But they went 0-2 against Indiana, like I said. So obviously, this is going to keep them from a perfect grade. So I'm gonna give them A minus. Give them an extra little couple points because not only did they lose twice, but they lost to the national champion. So it's not much you can do there.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Moving on to the coach behind that year they had the statistically best season in program history, Dan Lanning. Right, gonna give him an A this year. He's officially moved from that rising star status to top tier elite. Right, he's now 48-8 through 4 seasons in Eugene. Not many programs can be happy with a program like that or with a record like that. An era of 4 seasons. The highlight from this guy, right? His gutsy play calling and that 2 overtime win at Penn State. He showed he has the stones for the Big Ten's, biggest stages. The challenge that he's facing, right? He'll have a massive test in 2026 as he has to replace both his offensive and defensive coordinators for the first time in his tenure. And don't get me wrong, it's a challenge, but it's a good challenge, right? That means you're doing something right in your program. You're doing something so well, people want to pick from your program to mimic it. So I think it's a challenge that he won't have a hard time, you know, replacing or fulfilling, but it is nonetheless difficulty for sure.
Yeah, just like you said, it means you're doing the right thing. Obviously, the college football world has professionals way better than us that know how to diagnose what makes a good coordinator,
Mhm.
um, and so they know what they're doing when they're hiring away a good offensive and defensive coordinators. But it also means your program's not getting stale, right? A lot of times, a coordinator stays there too long, and especially if you're having success like Oregon, okay, teams are going to be able to figure you out. So,
Mhm.
that's just like the flip side of the coin. You can look at it from a positive angle. Let's talk about offense and defense for this group. Offense led by Dante Moore. The Ducks were definitely a big play machine. They ranked 11th nationally in scoring, and they Moore threw for a little over 3,500, almost 3,600 yards and 30 touchdowns. While their freshman running back Jordan Davison was a goal line, monster with 15 rushing touchdowns. So their offense, I think, gets an A. Their defense, I'll give an A. Although I'm thinking about that performance against Indiana in the postseason, but I'll stick with my gut here. I'll keep an A. The Duck defense, it lived up to the hype. They finished top 5 total defense. They were particularly dominant in the Orange Bowl. They gave up 0 points against one of the most high flying offenses this year with Texas Tech. So overall, it's an A here from me.
Nice, nice. Looking at their best win and worst loss of the year, I'm gonna have to go back to that second overtime win at Penn State. In a college game day atmosphere, they proved that they can handle the physicality of the Big Ten, and this win effectively secured the playoff spot. It kind of was a butterfly effect for both teams. You saw Oregon, maintain that high level of play, and you just saw Penn State had a downfall after this game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Worst loss, I think it's pretty obvious that playoff win in the Peach Bowl. I mean, the playoff loss in the Peach Bowl against Indiana. Um, Losing to the Hoosiers was tough twice, but getting blown out in the semifinal was, a reality check that showed a gap between Oregon and the very top of the mountain in 2025. So,
Yeah. And that's why I was hesitant to give Oregon that A on defense, just because they
right.
gave up 56 points. But it kind of felt like the whole team gave up, not just the defense. So I don't know if I can just knock the defense on that one. But 56 points is a lot.
Yep. So they get a B minus there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's talk about portal and prep for the future. I think they probably picked up the third or fourth best quarterback in the portal. I'm not looking at any list here. I'm just going off the top of my head. But Dante Moore, he is a superstar. Definitely does not want to be a New York Jet, so he wants to come back to college. But Dan Lanning showed that he isn't resting. They got Dylan Raiola out of the portal to provide elite competition and depth for 2026. They have the number 3 recruiting class for 2026. They have 4 5-star commits. And it looks like they, instead of quantity, they went for quality this year in terms of their portal. They're only bringing in 15 transfers, which is the lowest amount under Lanning. But to me, that looks like you're having stability in your program. You're not having to rely on huge influxes of talent. Now you're just shoring up where you see deficiencies. So yes, this is a break from the trend, but I think it's a trend in the good direction. And one of the best uh, uh, additions that they have to their secondary is safety Koi Parich. I think he's coming in from Minnesota, if I remember correctly. But for in terms of this category, we're going to give them B plus. Overall, I think they had a B grade for the 2025 season, and yeah, B, solid B. They were a perfect 32-0 under Dan Lanning when they allowed fewer than 34 points since he started. And then the Peach Bowl, just kind of everything unraveled. Indiana's 56 points was the most in it that a Oregon defense has surrendered in the Dan Lanning era. So it proved that even an elite defense has a breaking point when you're going up against 24-year-olds. But in any case, B for the season there. Any final thoughts there, Aaron?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there with the B. They had a great regular season. We just kind of saw a breakdown and a clear separation in that semifinal playoff. And I still tip my cap off to Dan Lanning, but there's a little bit more of level or ladder he has to climb to get to the ultimate top.
Yep, for sure. That's about it for what we have for today. We'll be back later this week. We're gonna call out the best position groups for this fall. Best position groups and teams to look out for that in the fall. And we're gonna have a few more report cards. So appreciate you guys watching. If there's a team you want us to cover, please put it in the comments, and we will be sure to get to them. And once again, just appreciate you guys watching. See you guys next time.